Hey everybody, this is Rodney with GearCore EDC with a video showing the work I did for a subscriber of mine, Poet Fisherman. It's been a real joy, brother. I've enjoyed interacting with you on the phone and your comments, and of course all my subscribers. I enjoy interacting with all of y'all. Me and Poet Fisherman got together and talked about a knife mod with these Raffir Uranium SFX blue 3-stage scales that I did on a Tucson TS17, and he reached out to me and wanted to know something to do on a knife for him, and we talked about some different models and stuff, and he finally chose the Civivi Exarch Damascus. And this knife was not too challenging. It's very thin scale material, and as you can see, it started out with and I have one slab left over, and he's being so gracious and letting me keep this. I'm sure I'll make something out of it, maybe a one-side scale or another knife, another small knife or something for my personal collection, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Poet. I really appreciate that. But you can see that there's a big difference in the scale material thicknesses, the finished product versus what it started out as. And I was able to get both sides made out of one piece, and then I have a little small chunk left over. I've uploaded 2 previous picture videos trying a new app I had, so I could sort of show the process of what was going on in the making it. And it wasn't in great detail. There was a lot of things that I didn't take pictures of because I was busy working and trying to figure things out. I do not make knives for a living. I'm a machinist. I run a manual mill day in and day out, and have been at the same job for over 10 years, and I've been a machinist for about 30 years. Modding knives and doing little things here and there, I've always enjoyed doing my own, and I take a honor in being able to do something for somebody else, and they get as much joy out of something that I get joy out of. And knowing that Poet will be carrying this in his pocket or wherever he carries it, and if it puts a smile on his face, that's all I need to know. And I'm really hoping he enjoys this. He's seen pictures of it. This is the first video shoot, so this will be the first he's seen of it around the same time y'all are seeing it when I get this done and uploaded. So with that being said, what I did is basically, you can tell in the previous picture video that I disassembled the knife and grabbed the scales and did measurements, of pivot diameters and counterbore depths and side tapers. And something we discussed is the side tapers he wanted, but he didn't want it to be textured like this. And I told him that might be a little bit harder for me to do. It's almost like a knurling or a real fast process mill, where the feed rate is pretty significant, and it leaves that coarser finish. And in this material, because it's sort of a softer material, I didn't know how much of an issue I would have with the corners flaking or breaking off. So I had to machine this pretty slow and in light cuts to keep it from possibly breaking and cracking. I was very sort of timid at the very end process of some of the things I did about it cracking or breaking on me. Even though it is a pretty resilient material, I definitely do not advise slamming this down on the concrete, or possibly, I'm sure it would take a light bump here and there, but it is not a hard use material, and Poet knows that. This is a great Sunday knife to carry to church, or just have it in your pocket as a conversation piece. Any of y'all who have watched my previous videos on this material, it is a 3-stage, and it glows in the dark. It turns blue in sunlight. It's pretty resilient in the way it looks. I'm going to try to get this charged up a little bit. I have my flash on my camera on, but you can sort of see, I don't know if it's going to show up, the glow in the dark part. but you can look in one of my previous videos where I did a picture video to show the charge. You can really see how the light makes it disappear real quick, but it glows there and it goes right away. But if I were to take this out of the light, it would be glowing right now. And I have a UV light here that I got from another subscriber of mine, Berg Knife, we did in the trade, to where you can see the UV light turns it blue. Isn't that cool? And you can sort of see the green hues coming out in it with the glow in the dark feature with the light on it as it hits it. And that's what it looks like in sunlight. It turns it blue. And the warmer it is, it reacts differently when it's warm also. So, you know, natural UV light. But this is just a simple, you know, charge back and forth with this UV light. And it turns a nice blue. And then it fades back to the factory color. But that's the oddity of this material, and that it is filled with aluminum chips that a machinist would make and sweep off the floor and throw away. It's done in like an epoxy. I'm not sure the material or the epoxy that is used, or resins or whatever. I'm sure it's done under pressure because there is no voids or cracks or pivots, or, you know, it's a really good material, and it's very machinist friendly. It's soft. It can be sanded and filed fairly easy and shaped. With that being said, it was challenging here and there, some of the things I did. And I'll go through the orders of what I did. And the action on this knife, the Civivi, is just, it made it a great knife to work with, because the action on this front flipper is awesome. I mean, top notch. I've got quite a few front flippers, and this is by far one of the best actions on any of the front flippers I have. But it's just a nice piece. And what we're going to do is I'm going to disassemble this knife and show you where I did some work at. And before I disassemble it, the original knife, the clip was mounted on top of the scales. And I don't know if you can see that behind my hand. Now the only thing that's sticking up, because I could not find any flathead screws, is the screw heads. Before, the clip was mounted directly to the scales, and it was reversible from right to left. Now, he's right-handed, right-hand carry only. He doesn't care about switching this knife to left. So I deleted, you notice in these scales, it's set up to where you can carry the clip right or left, but it sits on top of the scale. On this knife, I machined the pocket form and rebent the pocket clip, so it allows for a better in the pocket. Now I'll try to give you a little quick show of what it looks like in pocket. So it's fully down in the pocket, and you can see it goes in and out really easy. It just rides right over the top of them screws, because they are a round head, and you can see the tension on that is right against the scales. I machined that pocket out, and I deleted the hole on the show side to where it's just one hole, because on the other scale, on the show side, the side with the cutout in it here, you can see that it had two holes. Well, he's not using that hole, so I said, why do I need to put another hole there? So I talked to him about that, did that, and then on where the lanyard tube is here, you can see that there's a notch cut out here in this area. Well, on the factory liners, this was set up to where it's just pocketed in the center, which made it pretty hard and cumbersome to get some paracord in there. And I talked to him about it, and I said I could do that, but it would be a little more of a challenge, and I think it might create a stress area for something to break. And I talked to him about machining that area out to match the lanyard opening. Now, granted, the clip is still on that side, but if he runs paracord in there, it'll be much easier to run through there. And you can see the bevels I was talking about that are textured. And on mine, the bevels are there, but they're not textured. You can see that the same bevels are there. And all the same perimeters and angles are on the front, the fore and aft of the knife and the cutout for the liner release on the knife is cut out so you can reach the liner release. And you know, it was a fun knife to play with. And there's still a few edges here and there before I put this in a shipping box. I'm going to feather a few things out, but I wanted to get it on camera before I actually shipped it to them. There's a few edges here and there that I just want to address, but it's pretty right there, what I would call great. But what it takes to disassemble this knife is I'm going to use a WIA 759. It's made by WIA Tools. Nice hardened bits. They're not going to eat your screws up. They're not going to fall apart even if you got some knives that are really hard to adjust or won't come loose. It's a pretty resilient tool. So we use a T8, T6, and T7. T8, T7, T6. So we'll start off by removing the pocket clip, and it takes a T6. And I'm going to take this apart so you can sort of see what I had to do on the interior and exterior of the knife. Also, because when I did this modified clip portion, these screws ran into the liner, the backspacer. So I could no longer use the same screw lengths because they were too long. So I had to modify the length of the screws. And you can see here where I've machined that pocket to allow the pocket clip to be recessed. And then you have a T7, excuse me, that's the 8, a T7 for this side. Now, I won't fully take it apart. I'll get the scales off. I'm sorry, I'm off camera. Forgive me. I'm trying to do this from behind the camera. I did not have to modify that screw. And then you have the pivot screw, which is a T8. Now I added, to get that screw the right height and to add some support, I added a small, about a 10-15 thou stainless steel washer for that liner. Now I'm going to pull these off, and I'm going to leave the knife together. There's no reason to take it back apart. And there's the pivot. But you can see all the intricate mill work and how thin these are. And the cutouts. You know, this is an exact replication. These are 10 thou thicker. So they're not exact. They're a little bit thicker. 10 thou. And a 10 thou's, if you're not familiar with thousandths, a hair on your head measures about 2. So you're talking, you know, 5 hairs stacked together, and that's 10 thou, roughly. So you can see the shape and the counter bores. And the cutout for the liner. And the single counter bore screw in the back, and the cutout for the lanyard option that I did. And then on the back side, the non-show side, you can see where I did the cutout for the lanyard and the pocket for the pocket clip to lay in to make it function better. He said that was a pet peeve of his on this knife, and I agree. And then the pocket and counter bore for the pivot. And then one exception on this side is you have the relief that is machined into the scale for the liner lock to be able to push over and clear for the action on the knife. And I don't know how hard it is to show up because it's such a clear color, but you can sort of see where I have the same relief done. I don't know if you can sort of see the cut out there, get it to focus. It's really hard. It's such a fine line. You can see where I cut that out. And these scales just really pop. The chips, you know, it was such a joy, but yet a challenge to machine without getting worried about something was going to bust off the corner and flake out. You know, I had to be really careful in doing this. But it come out really, really good. I mean, you can see all the fine little chips in there. And the shiny effect when the light hits it. So that is the knife. Now, simply to put it back together. Oh, one thing I wanted to show on the, and Poet Fisherman knew this, on this pivot pin, this is not your typical D-shaped pivot pin. There is a, if I can get that to focus in there, there is a little small slot that in the original liner scale, not liner scale, there is a D-shaped slot. So when you lay this in here, it does two things. It orientates the Civivi straight up, and it keeps it from spinning. Well, I explained to him that I was not running the CNC. I had to run this on the manual mill. So I was not able to cut that little pocket. Now, I told him there was a way that I possibly could, but it might take longer and it would take more time, that I could figure out a way to make this happen. He said not to worry about it. And I was glad he did, so I could go ahead and get this done and get it back to him. And we briefly talked on the phone today about putting a Loctite on there, because once you got it set, you know, he would never need to take it back apart. But, you know, with a knife, you need to take it back apart. You need to service it and take it apart. And so it does stay tight. It doesn't spin on you. You can get this set to where the Civivi pivot pin is set correctly and orientated right. The only thing is, if you were to Loctite it, there's a possible chance, because it would be free spinning, you would not be able to get it back apart without a little bit of issue. So we have decided not to put Loctite on it. Now, with that being said, also because I modded this, now I'm going to actually, I've already lubed this knife up, but I probably need to put a little more lube on it. So let's see. We'll go ahead and I've got everything. Forgive me, I got everything off of camera. I keep looking down here and it's not on camera. I'm not used to disassembling knives on camera. Forgive me. But the one thing I told him today on the phone was that because I modified the pocket clip, you cannot reuse the screws on the carbon fiber scales. So you'd either have to find some new screws like the original, because they were shortened. They could work, but there wouldn't be much thread engagement, because the combination of the clip being sunk and a little bit thicker scale material, I don't think they reach. They might. I have not tried it. I'm not going to. But he knows that if he decided to go revert back to the original scales, that he would have to get some screws. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pull this apart here, and I'm going to put a little bit of juice on each side. I got my KPL, where at? In my drawer. I've been rearranging stuff in here. I use a desk, and I've been trying to get things situated to make my knife life easier. And I still don't have everything organized like I need to. I'm trying to find the, here it is. Okay. Got the good old lube. And there's the the bearings. And it doesn't take much of this stuff. Just a little drop. Goes a long way. Now I always install these bearings cage side out. That's just me. That's just the way I do it. When I say cage side out, I mean roller side where it is captured to the outside. I'm not sure if that's the intended way, but that's the way I do it when I disassemble a knife and reassemble it. I'm just going to slide this back in here and capture those bearings. Lay that back down there. Put this cap on this before I turn it over. Yes, forgive me. It's sort of hard doing everything where you can't see it. Try to get this in view for you. And it's a pretty straightforward knife. Sort of like Two Sons. Two Sons are just a pleasure to work on. And this is no different, because they're very straightforward. Slide everything together. Look at it, make sure it's captured. And what I'm going to do is take that one screw and the washer, because I want to make sure I had the right spacing so everything sits, because this screw here does not sit completely flush. Now you can see an example here what I'm talking about. That C is not orientated correctly. So all you got to do is spin that around, and it's not spinning when I'm turning. That's just the way I put it in there. I need to actually load it correctly. Sorry, I'm off camera again. And I have no fingernails. We'll push this out a little bit and get that orientation right. Go lay down. Almost there. Okay. Now that that's set right, we'll take this screw and just snug it up. And I'm just applying light pressure to the Civivi pivot pin on the back side, just to ensure that it's still lined up. And then I'll take the single screw on the scale side, presentation side, with a T7, and just lightly get that put in. I can get it lined up. Nice and flush. And now these holes are lined up. Lay this here with the T6 and get one screw started on the pocket clip. And this is so hard to do behind the camera. Okay, now the last screw, which is a little shorter than the other one because it goes into a different area in the back spacer. And just snug those up by hand because I'm not even using the bit, and look at it and make sure it does not to be tweaked either way. The slot is machined in the center, so it should keep it center in the profile of the scale. And because this is screwing into the liner and the back spacer, depending on which one I'm screwing on, if I can get this lined up, I need the T6, not the 7 for this side. Tighten that down, and then the T7 for the other side, and recheck the Civivi pin to make sure it's still lined up, and take the T8 and check the tightness on the blade. Oh, action is just so great. Needs to be snugged up just a little bit. That's the thing about these. Sometimes to get it just right, you have to really sit here and tweak it back and forth. No play. Nice, good lock up. Centering is good. Keep open. Looks like it might be a little bit to the non-show side. Let that all sit in there. Work this thing back and forth. Just listen to that. That's just sweet. Do that all night. Got that action working. Let's see if we can snug it up just a wee bit. I think that's good. It's depending on how I hold the camera. I might have to adjust it later. It's looking like it's right down the center. Action is good. Feels good and tight. It's not loose. Which, granted, this is not a knife that you're going to use as a pry bar, or a screwdriver. This is a delicate knife. This is a long video. I'm sorry it took so long, but this is the finished product, minus a few little rough edges here and there that I want to fine tune, of the modified pocket clip, bent to shape in the pocket with the recessed cutaway, the hold delete on the front show side, and the custom scales made out of Raffir, R-A-F-F-I-R, Uranium SFX blue. So we got the sort of a gray opaque look in natural light, the blue violet in sunlight, and the glow in the dark at night, in a beautiful Damascus blade. It is just gorgeous. Look at that pattern. Very, very nice. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you so much. If you're not a subscriber yet, please hit that subscribe button. I'd appreciate you watching my videos, taking the time to comment. I enjoy interacting with you. And remember, God loves you. God's good. And have a great night. This is Rodney with Garrick EDC. Keep that edge right. Bye now.